Secret of the Men Pictures presents the Forex video trading series. Black Belt, Second Degree, Trade Guide to Major Economies. Canada. Ooh, Canada. Uncle Sam's friendly, environment-loving, French-influenced, semi-frozen buddy up north. It is a place known to have created some of the most amazing things in the world, such as basketball, baseball, maple syrup, and Smarties. Smarties. Canada, a country which takes up most of North America, extends from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the east of the Pacific. It is comprised of 10 provinces and 3 territories, and is considered as one of the world's most developed countries. In terms of landmass, Canada is numero dos in the world right after Russia. Given its sheer size and contributions in the world, you can just imagine how Canada and its domestic currency, the Canadian dollar, are important to the Forex world. Here are just some little tidbits if you feel so inclined to read. The economic overview. Canada is considered as a resource-based country, which means basically most of its economic growth is experienced early on came from the utilization and export of its own natural resources. According to the IMF, Canada's economy is the 8th largest in the world, making it part of the world's G8. It ranks the 5th biggest producer of gold and the 14th largest producer of black crack. Despite its robust industrial and mining industry, much of Canada's GDP actually comes from its service sector. Its advanced services sector employs 3 out of every 4 working Canadians and account for almost 70% of the country's GDP. Next time you meet with a Canadian, go ahead and make a bet with him that he works in the services industry. More often than not, you'll win. Canada's economy really got going in January of 1989 when the Free Trade Agreement came into effect. The agreement basically removed all tariffs, and is the tax imposed on trade, between the U.S. and Canada. In effect, Canada now exports as much as 80% of its goods to the United States. The Bank of Canada, BOC, is the main governing body when it comes to determining the country's monetary policy. Decisions on the monetary policy are made by the Governing Council, which is made up of the bank's governor, the senior deputy, and 4 other deputy governors. Unlike most central banks, the BOC doesn't have a set time to make changes on policies. The council meets every single working day and can alter monetary policy to their liking at any time. The bank's basic mandate is similar to other central banks, in that they aim to make sure the Canadian dollar's value is stable and that the country's inflation rate is within their 1 to 3% target. The BOC does this through open market operations and constant adjustment of the bank rate. The BOC implements its own market operations by using a method called Large Value Transfer System, LVTS. The LVTS enables commercial banks all over Canada to borrow and lend money to each other so they could go about their daily operations. Now, the interest rate charged on these transactions is called the bank rate. While during the bank rate, the BOC can control the flow of money in the economy. To illustrate this, let's just say the bank rate is set at 2%. In one of its meetings, the BOC realizes that the CAD is losing value much faster than expected, which is causing businesses to increase the prices of the goods they sell and the services they offer. The BOC then decides to raise the bank rate to 2.5%. By hiking the bank rate, the interest rate needed to be paid to lenders increases. In turn, reduces the likelihood that banks, businesses, and consumers are taking additional debt. Now, since there is less money in the pockets of consumers, the chance of them spending is decreased, preventing any further inflation. What business in their right mind would increase prices when nobody is buying, right? You might be wondering why the CAD is nicknamed after Canada's national bird, the loonie. Well, that's because of the engraved design on Canada's coins. Check out the other cool properties. Historically, the price of black crack has been highly correlated with the U.S. dollar, Canadian dollar. The general rule is whenever oil prices start climbing, the Canadian dollar usually follows. The price of oil is projected to increase over the next couple of years, then you want to go sell on the U.S. dollar, Canadian dollar. The dollar CAD has been known to move in tight ranges for the most part of the day. It's only when U.S. traders are eating their Cheerios during the overlap of the European trading session and U.S. trading session that the pair begins to move. A key factor to look for when trading the U.S. CAD is that the direction is closely tied to the U.S. economy. Remember that being more than close neighbors, the U.S. and Canada engage with heavy trade with each other. When the U.S. economy experiences robust growth, the Canadian economy usually is just right behind it. So whenever you decide to trade the CAD, take some time off to see how well, or poorly, the U.S. is doing. The CAD usually doesn't start moving until the U.S. trading session, around 1 p.m. GMT. The CAD offers little movement during the Asian trading session and in the morning European trading session. Some important economic indicators to keep in mind. Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Similar to other central banks, the Bank of Canada's objective is to make sure that inflation does not get out of hand. Since the Consumer Price Index tracks the increase or decrease of the prices of consumer goods and services, the report is closely watched by currency traders. A gross domestic product, or GDP. The GDP is a broadcast measure of Canada's economic activity. It reveals whether the country is growing or not. Trade balance. Just like other commodity-based countries, Canada's economy is highly susceptible to changes in export and import activities. IV Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI. The PMI is a survey designed to see whether businesses are optimistic or pessimistic about the economy. A reading above the baseline of 50 means that conditions in the business sector is growing, while a reading below 50 indicates otherwise. What moves the CAD? U.S. economic data usually prints roughly at the same time as Canadian data. On the other hand, negative data from the U.S. coupled with positive data from Canada could lead to a massive drop in the U.S. dollar Canadian dollar's value. On the other hand, positive U.S. data and poor Canadian data could send the U.S. CAD soaring high. Because of the proximity between U.S. and Canada, company mergers and acquisitions happen quite often. These cause a huge amount of money to flow between the two countries, which create a significant effect on the foreign exchange market. For example, in order for a U.S. company to buy out a Canadian company, it must first exchange its U.S. dollars to Canadian dollars to complete the transaction. Imagine the amount of money that flows to the foreign exchange market to seal the deal. Some of the trading tactics. Since the U.S. dollar Canadian dollar is only active during the U.S. trading sessions, the pair is highly susceptible to fake-outs during the other two trading sessions. This means that a break in significant support level in the U.S. dollar Canadian dollar during the morning European trading session would, more often than not, simply be a fake-out. Watching the differences in the results of the economic data between the U.S. and Canada is also a great practice to determine where the U.S. CAD is headed. Because both the U.S. and Canadian data are released just a few hours or even minutes apart, variances in results tend to result in exaggerated one-directional moves. For instance, negative U.S. data coupled with positive Canadian data would be a good reason to sell the U.S. CAD. Lastly, beyond looking at economic data, spend some time analyzing oil price behavior would help a lot in trading the CAD. Since Canada is considered as one of the world's major black crack producers, changes in its price create a quite hefty impact on the CAD's value. In fact, since 1988, the exchange rate of U.S. CAD and the price of oil has been inversely correlated with as much as 68%. How can you use this to your advantage? Well, if you notice that over time the oil prices in your local gas station are rising, it could give you additional confirmation that you need to short the dollar CAD.